one about the symbol of our nation.
Jono Naylor.
I move that the question be now put.
No, you've got to get it right when you close your motions. I'm calling Carmel Sepuloni.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair. Mr Chair...
I'm calling you in a moment.
Councillor.
The member must go back to standing orders. There's a specific wording that you need to use. Nothing else, just focus on that. Carmel Sepuloni.
Mr Chair, I think we've had some great alternative options offered today for the title of this bill. And Mr Chair, I do have some other alternative options, but I'll discuss those later in my speech. I just want to talk about Part 3 of this bill in relation to actually the title and commencement part of this bill, Mr Chair, and I think that's allowed during committee stages. So in Part 3, what we have is that we have two clauses that give quite wide powers to amend the process by order of council. These may be standard, but they read as the government being able to correct errors in the legislation without coming back to the House. So, Mr Chair, I want to talk about that section in relation to this, because if the government, because of Section 3, is going to have power to come back to the House to correct errors in the legislation, correct errors in the legislation without having to come back to the House, I want an answer from the Minister about what errors they're anticipating in this bill and whether or not there are any anticipated problems or potential errors that may come out of the title or commencement stage of this bill. So, in the commencement part, Mr Chair, for example, could an error be that in relation to, say, Part 2 of Clause 2. So we've got here, if in the second flag referendum the alternative flag design gains a greater number of votes than the current New Zealand flag, then Sections 69, 70 and 71 commence on whichever of the following dates is earlier, a date set by the Governor-General by order in council, or the date that is 6 months after the date on which the result of the second flag referendum is declared. So, Mr Chair, with that in mind, and we're talking about the date there, and we're also looking at the SOP that's been put up by my colleague Trevor Mallard, who's asked to change on the day and replace that with 5 years. Does that mean that the government could decide actually that's an error, and without bringing it back to the House, change that time frame? We're hoping actually that they support the SOP here today in the House, and that they change the wording from on the day and replace that with the words 5 years. So that's the SOP put up by Trevor Mallard. So does that mean that if they don't support the SOP in the House, that they could still do that later on once they discover the error of their ways and the fact that they've got it wrong in terms of the timeframes they've put around implementing this bill, Mr Chair? So if the Minister could respond to that, that would be good. Other errors, Mr Chair, you know, in terms of what they're saying in Part 3 about the government being able to correct errors without bringing it back to the House, I wonder whether or not when they leave the House, and if this does manage to happen in terms of a change of flag, and we proceed with the Act, Mr Chair, in terms of the rest of it, whether or not they could then change the actual title of the bill later on without bringing it back to the House. Is that what it means in terms of Section 3, Part 3, and how it applies to the title and commencement part of this Act, Mr Chair? I've got those questions for the Minister, and if he could respond, that would be greatly appreciated.
Mr Chair.